First story, the hollow march of Camp Gravenhill. They told us Camp Gravenhill was decommissioned decades ago, a rusted skeleton of what once housed brave men. But they reopened it for our training, saying it was isolated, cheap, perfect for field conditioning. They didn't mention the suicides, or the men who vanished, or the echoing bugle that sometimes played at night, though no one was ever seen holding it. My name is Sergeant Kyle Mercer. I've served in 3 tours, faced death up close, heard the scream of bullets by my ears. Nothing prepared me for what happened that October in West Virginia. We were a unit of 7, fresh from Fort Raleigh. We arrived under heavy fog, our boots crunching old gravel. The barracks smelled of mildew and something fouler, like metal and rot. Private O'Neill, the youngest among us, joked about ghosts. The rest of us didn't laugh. The first night, I heard footsteps pacing outside. I figured it was Corporal Dawson making rounds. But in the morning, Dawson was found sitting at the edge of the woods, mumbling to himself. His eyes were bloodshot, his mouth dry. He kept whispering, "They're still marching. They never stopped marching." We sent him back to base. That left 6 of us. The fog thickened by the second night. You could barely see the moon. Around midnight, I heard the bugle, a slow, eerie call to assembly, like a broken tribute to the fallen. But no one else seemed to hear it, or they didn't admit to it. On the 3rd night, Private Harper vanished. We searched everywhere. His bunk was untouched, his gear in place, but his rifle was gone. No sign of struggle, only his dog tags, hung neatly on the fence by the mess hall, like he placed them there himself. We radioed for evac. Command said it would take 2 days due to storms. We were told to hold position. What the hell were we holding against? By the 4th night, O'Neill cracked. He kept pointing to the tree line, screaming, "Look, he's in uniform. He's watching us." We saw nothing. But when I went out to calm him, I heard boots, dozens, marching in perfect unison just beyond the trees. But when I shined my light, there was no one. That night, the power failed. The barracks went cold. I heard someone crying in the latrine. I followed the sound, only to find Private Bell curled on the floor, bleeding from the ears. He kept whispering, "I can hear them," marching inside my head. Evac never came. On the 5th night, I found Lieutenant Granger hanging in the mess hall, but the rope wasn't tied to anything. He was just floating. His eyes were wide open, bloodshot, locked on something above, and scratched into the metal wall behind him were the words, "They never left." I tried to keep the rest of us together, but when I turned, the others were gone. I was alone. I started hearing voices over the radio, a language I didn't recognize, old, garbled, like a corrupted transmission from a war that never ended. I tried to run. I swear I did, but my legs wouldn't move. On the 7th night, I woke up in the parade field. I was standing in formation. All around me, figures in outdated uniforms, faces twisted in death, eyes hollow, marching, always marching, and I marched with them. I don't know how long it's been. I think I'm dead, or dreaming, or something in between. I see new recruits arrive sometimes. I try to scream, but my mouth doesn't move anymore. They will read this report and mark it as delusion, trauma, madness. But if you ever hear the bugles call from the woods, don't answer. Don't march. Second story. Beneath the sand of Elkhorn Base. I still have sand in my boots. No matter how many times I shake them out, I feel it. Gritty, warm, like it remembers what I saw out there. My name's Corporal Dean Marshall. I was stationed at Elkhorn Training Facility, a desert base tucked into the edge of Arizona. It wasn't on any map civilians could find, and if they stumbled on it, they'd be told it was just an old missile testing range. But that base, it held something else. They assigned me to night patrol the week the sand started moving. It began subtly. One night I spotted odd patterns in the dunes, spirals, like something massive had been crawling underneath. I told Sergeant Whitmore. He laughed it off. "Wind, Marshal? You ever heard of wind?" But the wind doesn't leave claw marks. I didn't sleep much after that. My post was near the southern fence, closest to the old hangars. Those hangars hadn't been used in years. Rumor was something went wrong there in the 80s, but no one ever explained what. At night, I'd hear scraping from inside, metallic, slow, like something dragging itself across concrete. On the 5th night, Private Miller vanished. He'd been sent to relieve me. Never showed. We found his radio 100 feet from the south fence, still hissing static. No footprints, just a hole, perfectly round, about 6 feet wide, sand pouring into it, like the desert was swallowing itself. Command said he went AWOL, but we all knew better. That's when they started assigning 2-man patrols. My new partner was Ramirez, good guy, funny, from Dallas. He didn't believe me when I told him the sand moved. Not until the 7th night. We were by the hangars, windless, still. Then the ground started to hum. I'm not kidding. It hummed. Ramirez dropped his flashlight. The beam caught something rippling just beneath the surface. It looked like skin. Pale, translucent skin under a thin crust of sand. We ran. But I swear, something followed. That night, the lights in the barracks flickered. One by one, soldiers began reporting nightmares. The same dream. A face under the sand with eyes like black glass. It spoke, but no one could remember what it said. On the 10th night, I watched Sergeant Whitmore get pulled under. He screamed once. The sand swallowed him up to his waist before anyone could grab him. I tried. God, I tried. His eyes locked with mine, wide, begging, and then he was gone. The hole closed behind him like it was never there. We were locked down after that. No communication out, no helicopters, no trucks, just silence and fear. Even the base dogs stopped barking. Ramirez and I decided to escape. We made a run for the north fence, the only spot where the dunes were thinner. Halfway there, Ramirez stopped, said he heard his mother's voice. I told him to keep moving. He didn't listen. The sand opened beneath him like a mouth. I heard him scream my name, then nothing, just silence. I kept running. I don't know how I made it out. I blacked out somewhere near the road. Woke up in a hospital in Flagstaff. They told me I was found wandering in the desert, dehydrated and delirious. No one believes me. Elkhorn doesn't exist on any map, no records, no base, no missing soldiers. But I remember the hum, I remember the glassy eyes, and I still have sand in my boots. Dear viewers, before we start the next horror story, I want to say, if you wish, you can support this YouTube channel financially through the details on the screen or in the description below the video. Thank you for your attention. Third story. The screaming in Wolf Pine 4. We had just finished chow at the mess tent when Sergeant Miller handed me the orders. Recon patrol, you're with Carter and Lewis. Wolf Pine perimeter. Move out in 10. Wolf Pine Forest was dense, dark, and godforsaken. Locals from the nearby town of Claridge called it cursed, said people disappeared there, hunters, hikers, even a whole church group once. But command didn't care. They needed eyes on the ground. Something had triggered motion sensors last night. My job was to find out what. We stepped into the woods around 1900 hours. Sun was already slipping behind the trees. Everything felt still, too still. Even the crickets were quiet. That should have been the first red flag. Carter cracked jokes to kill the tension. Bet it's just a raccoon tripping sensors, he said, laughing. But his voice sounded thin, nervous. By 2000, fog rolled in thick and fast. Lewis kept checking his compass. Something's off, he mumbled. We should have hit the northern ridge by now. He was right. We'd been walking straight, but nothing looked familiar. Trees were too twisted. The moss on their bark looked black, like it had rotted. Then we heard it. A scream. Far off at first. High-pitched, human. A woman. Then another, closer. This one guttural, like someone being ripped apart. Command, this is Bravo 6-1, I whispered into the radio. We have unidentified sounds, possible civilian in distress, requesting guidance. Only static came back. Carter spun in a circle. That came from behind us, he whispered. No, Lewis snapped. It came from ahead. They were both wrong. It came from everywhere. We raised rifles and started moving. Fast. But the fog kept getting thicker, choking. Every tree looked the same. We should have marked our path. We didn't. Rookie mistake. Then Lewis vanished. 1 second he was in front of me. The next, gone. No sound, no struggle, just missing. We searched, screamed his name, nothing, until we heard it again. That scream. But this time it was Lewis. We ran toward the sound, hearts hammering. We found a clearing and his gear, his boots, rifle, helmet, all laid out neatly in a perfect circle. But no blood, no Lewis. That's when Carter broke. He dropped his weapon and started running. I chased him, shouting, but he was gone too. Fog swallowed him whole. I was alone. And then I heard something walking. Not running, walking, deliberate, heavy. A shape moved through the fog, tall, slender, too tall. Its head scraped the lower branches, but its limbs moved wrong, like it was unfolding from itself. I froze, held my breath. It whispered. Not in English, not in any language I know, but I felt it inside my head, like fingers dragging through my skull. I backed away slowly, raised my rifle. It didn't flinch. Then it opened its mouth, and I saw faces. Human faces, Lewis, Carter, dozens of others stretched across its jaw like skin. They were screaming. I ran, I don't know how long, hours maybe. The fog never lifted, trees twisted, time stopped making sense. My watch was frozen at 21:05. Then I woke up, on base, in my cot. Except it wasn't the same base. Everything was too quiet, too clean. No one answered when I called out. No voices, no engines, just wind. And then I saw the calendar on the wall. It was 2038. I'd been gone 15 years and I hadn't aged a day. I turned to the mirror above my cot, and in the reflection behind my eyes, they were screaming.